Hello everybody. This video is going to be mostly for people who are looking for help with helping a friend who is suicidally depressed. And it could be a friend, a loved one, or even just someone that has decided to open up to you about what they're going through. And you just want a little bit of guidance with that, especially if you've never been through suicidal depression. You may not know how to approach it. You may feel really uncomfortable even talking about any of those kind of feelings. So if you care about someone and you just want some ideas for things that can help and new perspectives on the situation that give you a little bit more empowerment, that's what this video is about. And this is coming from personal experience as well as interviewing a lot of people that have gone through suicidal depression and have been hospitalized or treated. And so let me just talk about the main points that I'll be going over. Discharging the intensity of the emotions, facilitating a release, discerning the best response, whether or not to involve other people, what happens when someone is hospitalized, what's going on in the mind of a suicidally depressed person, what not to do, what not to say, how to show compassion for someone when you don't get it or accept their outlook, and everything in between. I'm going to cover a lot of things. The board behind me is all stuff that I got from reading Pete Walker's books, and I'm pretty sure that these are from the Tao of Feeling. If it's not from the Tao of Feeling, then it's from Complex PTSD from Surviving to Thriving. But Pete Walker is the author's name, and he's just putting these concepts together so that we can have the language to think about it and learn and to be introspective and reflective. So the 4 stages of grieving, these are up here on the board because I want people to be able to get familiar with them, just be able to recognize the different stages that they observe someone going through as a clue, as which way to nudge them to help them keep going through the process. Typically what the feeling of suicidal depression boils down to is resolved by grieving and by facing some things. It really is this overwhelming sense of the person's truth trying to come out, and it is a grief over the old way of believing things were in most cases, and I'll go over the other instances as well. First of all, and let me restored emotionality. This is kind of what we're going for, and these were all new for me, and I thought, well, this is great because, what do you do with sadness? What do you do with anger? What do you do with fear? What do you do with jealousy? What do you do with blame? And these are examples of how they can shift into something that is, it's more relieving, it's healthier, it's more a good energy rather than something that is going to drag you down further into depression. Sadness mellowing into solace, anger unfolding into laughter, fear flipping into excitement, jealousy opening up into appreciation, and blame giving way to forgiveness. So this is just kind of a guideline for when you have the energy of, say, fear, that is it's got a charge to it. So fear is not really going to go into appreciation or into solace. Fear is going to go into something that still has a charge, and that can be excitement. You can turn the fear of something into being excitement about something, or being excited about something, and it's really just a shift in the perception. Okay, so that's the board, that's Pete Walker stuff, and this is not really to be memorized as much as it is to be just kind of sense, like, what is the energy behind all of these ideas. You don't have to say these exact words. You don't have to take any of this advice. Again, this is just coming from personal experience, myself and several other people that were willing to answer my questions because I was very curious. I've been through suicidal depression. I know what that's like. I've never been hospitalized, so I don't have that firsthand experience, but I've talked to a lot of people that have been. Okay, how to help a friend who is suicidally depressed. I have some don'ts here, and this is all over the place. I apologize, but again, it's just about picking up the essence of this approach. You don't have to memorize any of this. Just what is the common energy underneath all of this. So what we don't want to do is use more false ideas about reality to sugarcoat the situation. We want to be willing to be present with this person if they choose to share their pain with you. Let it be without acting on the impulse to challenge it or correct it. Listen, listen, listen. Put your phone completely away. Give your most patient attention to the moment. I think a lot of the buildup that leads to getting to that place of feeling suicidal is just this series of lack of acknowledgement, where it's the truth is unseen and the illusion is kind of cracking through, and this is unbearable for a lot of people. But it's a sign of a type of like inner awakening happening. It is something that's trying to break through, and it is painful because the mind is, in most cases, it's not really given the tools to imagine the way out of it or to see its own delusions. It's locked in, so it's kind of running off of narratives that like about the person's identity, and a lot of suffering is based on a misidentification. It's going on like this for so long, and this it's kind of like your soul trying to break through and tell you like this is not in harmony with who you really are, and it's trying to break you out of that shell of thinking that you are just this person in this position, job, or that being a wife or a mother is your only role, and that being perfect at that is the only thing that makes you a worthy person. I'm just giving random examples, but this can really be anything. And this isn't really for you to figure out what's wrong, because oftentimes the person, if they're allowing themselves to verbally vent, they will say out loud the very things that they need to hear. And if they're saying something that isn't quite true, and this isn't always the case, but sometimes it is, like where they are overinflating the hopelessness of a situation, let their words be in the air so they can hear them and be faced with them. Let them feel their own words' validity and resonance with truth. Let them discharge the emotions and verbally express how their experience feels to them. What you are doing while your friend is verbally ventilating is you are providing or supporting the safe space for an intolerable pain to be faced, to be acknowledged. And when someone is lost in their own misidentification with suffering, they cannot simply be told by another person. They must recognize it. They must have this direct experience, facing the perceived unbearable despair, finding it to be an illusion. And this doesn't happen right away, but this is what we're going for. They start to, when they're allowed to express themselves, then they can see it on the table and evaluate the contents and privately evaluate if it's resonating with their truth, or if they can pick up on a falsehood or a discordance, or just something's not quite right. And if they'll allow themselves to look at that and investigate it, that's what you're supporting occurring here. You're not judging it. You're not pointing it out. you are facilitating their release so that it can come into their awareness, so they can verbalize it, so they can get it out of the body, excuse me, get it out of the body and get the head clear, and then they can perceive reality a little better. They can assess their feelings, assess what's just wild and out there and what's really how they feel underneath everything. So when they are facing their words and their reaction to what's going on, they kind of reveal, this is more what you might see happening, is that they kind of have a perspective of disconnection and, in my opinion, a spiritual amnesia. I mean, I would call it that. What they are realizing is something that is private, internal, and gradual. You know, this might not unfold into an awakening on their part, you know, after one conversation. But it's about planting the seeds of energy toward that. And, you know, maybe I should have started out by saying this, but you don't have to feel responsible to provide the solutions and all the answers and find, you know, to put yourself in a responsible position to relieve this person of whatever stress or burden that they're under. But what you do have to offer is allowing them to regain their own sense of empowerment, which is the same as teaching someone how to fish versus just giving them a fish to eat. So on one hand, you can help them in the moment, or on another, you can contribute to that overall journey and use your awareness of how to handle the moment, understanding how the emotions need to discharge, trying to move them toward the 4 stages of grieving. They're probably already crying if they've called you and they're suicidal. Now, some people are emotionally flat, and I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. But a lot of people are already at that first stage of crying when they're going through this and when they're reaching out to someone. And if they are communicating that they're suicidal, I think that it's wonderful that they have reached out and trusted someone to help guide them through this feeling that they're having, and to get them to start you know, verbalizing, which can kind of pull the crying into the angering. You're just listening. You're kind of letting it unfold, and you're not putting your own stuff on there by saying things like, well, everything will be okay, or it's not that bad. Like, this just says that you don't get it, and this person is probably so overwhelmed because they are bombarded with people that aren't getting them, or that aren't getting their experience is what I mean. So use your awareness of everything that you're learning in this video and everything that you have access to when you're in your own balance. Use your awareness to facilitate their release of emotional buildup by listening attentively, calmly, and patiently. Get yourself in a neutral state. Be aware of your breathing once in a while. You are the calm, peaceful harbor for the storm in this person's reality, for this, you know, conversation. Or maybe for the day. It just, you know, every situation is different, so I try not to lock it into too many details. Because, again, it's all about the energy. And if you don't know what to say, just be present. If the person is prompting you to respond, you can simply say something that signifies that you are paying attention, like repeating the gist of what they're communicating, just signifying that you are listening. You know, not repeating word for word like people that aren't listening will do sometimes, but you know, reflecting back, but without any added anything. Just reflecting back a neutral, I see you, I acknowledge you, I hear you, and I'm with you. And you don't have to say, there's no judgment. You don't have to say this is a safe space. You do that with your behavior and with the energy that you embody, with your own self-control of your responses. They absorb that from you, and they pick up on that, and it's very soothing to know that they've found this safe harbor. Other things that you can say if they're really, wanting a response from you is, like if they say, there's no way I can go on without my husband, my wife, my job, whatever the old circumstance was that they feel the loss over, which is, a lot of circumstances, not all circumstances. But if there is something that they are consciously focused on as the source of their pain, you can neutrally respond with things like just reflecting back. I can see that he or she meant a lot to you. I can see that you put a lot of work into that. I can see that you invested a lot of your energy into that. You worked very hard. Just by listening well and being receptive to whatever they need to express, that gives you what you need to say if you are prompted to say something. So the 4 stages of grieving, the grieving aspect is usually not conscious in someone that's going through this kind of overwhelming episode of suicidal depressive feelings. But you as the friend, as the co-counselor, can assist in moving through the process just by knowing about the 4 stages of grieving: the crying, the angering, the verbal ventilation, and the feeling. So, and again, this is something that happens on its own, and you don't have to say like, okay, now let's go to stage 2. Like, let this be underlining what's happening. This doesn't need to be talked about directly. So the grieving aspect. Part of the person is stopping short of grieving and releasing their old identities. It's kind of a way to sum it up. A friend can facilitate resolution by listening, being present, staying neutral, supporting a safe space for verbal ventilation and emotional discharge, not feeding false narratives, but tolerating them with neutrality, or waiting until the person asks directly for your input on their narrative. And here we tread lightly and remain neutral and non-judgmental. Regarding discerning the person's needs, there's no way for me to give you, really usable, specific advice, say this, do this. So what I can tell you is to simply recognize the bigger picture perspective of what is occurring. And you take the responsibility for holding on to that perspective. And what is occurring is a misidentification, repression and blockage, disconnection, an outlook of despair, and emotional intensity. I'll read it again. This is what's happening, and this is the bigger picture. This is what you have in your awareness that you observe, and you don't really get pulled into it having meaning or anything. It's just understanding it. Misidentification, repression and blockage, disconnection, an outlook of despair, and emotional intensity. Do not use the social narrative or the person's external/social identity as a resource for positive focus. Use real, simple truth. Be in the moment. You might even say that their narrative has a virus and that you don't know what parts of it are infected. So stick with just simple truths that don't rely on something in the future panning out, or becoming rich, or just an unnecessary kind of materialistic view of things. If you're in a safe place and your things are calm and you're taking care of you and your friend, you're enjoying yourself. Well, maybe not enjoying yourselves, but it's a safe place and it's calm and comfortable, and it's welcoming and supportive, just recognizing that and maybe pointing that out if a person is frantic. Just, well, right now everything is okay. How do you feel right now? And bring them into the moment, and bring them into their body, and get them to breathe. Stick with reality. We don't have to make up a story to, like I said, sugarcoat things. That's what has gotten them in trouble. Now, yes, it got them in trouble so much that it's now cracking open the whole major illusion, and this is a good thing. This is actually just a long birthing process, and it does take a long time to figure out that there's a way out, but it is through a dark canal. So what we do is we support the space for verbal ventilation and emotional discharge in order to facilitate the return of their mental clarity. What they say and what they think and realize while they're venting will both calm them right then or within a few minutes, as well as get reflected upon later, and this should be insightful to them. And then even later, those hindsight reflections become very revealing because they can see the huge difference in their outlook between the moment of being in suicidal depression and the moment of the clarity returning. And again, we don't need to point out anything. See how silly that was? Don't say that. They'll realize that on their own. Encourage the person to keep taking care of themselves. Show that you care by checking in, bringing food, just inquiring. But don't take responsibility for their actions. You are not responsible for what someone else does. Do take responsibility for your actions. Use your balance and clarity to stay connected to the higher awareness, knowing that the intensity of the person's feelings will pass. Now, what if their outlook seems accurate and the emotions are flat and their only question is, what's the point? Personally, I'd say that's a good question. This is often the question that sends a person on their journey into spirituality. And I think underneath the disappointment with life is the absence of spiritual awareness and connection. And I think that disconnection is a result of our society being focused on the physical, material world. Because this is true from my experience, when the physical, material level of consciousness starts to be perceived as unfulfilling and counterintuitive, I believe this is the higher spiritual awareness trying to surface. The disenchantment that this person is feeling is valid. It literally is a disenchantment. It's a coming out from under the spell of a reductionist social mentality. So, when they're saying everything is horrible, in one aspect, they're not wrong. And it's being able to face that and see that while that may be true, it's not the whole truth. And the whole truth is huge and full of as much good as bad, maybe more good. I don't know. But you do create your own reality. You become, you steer your own vessel, become your own commander. The world is what you make of it. Your experience is going to be what you make of it. No, you don't control everything, but you control your reactions and you control your reception and what you transmit as well. Coming into this power, it starts to make those old things that we were worried about just irrelevant. So I do have some assuring statements that I can offer you. They're not great. I racked my brain, but after I offer these, I'm going to tell you why I think advice and assuring statements are weak and generally a bad idea. But some things that you can say if you just feel like it's the right thing to throw out there, you can point out to the person that this too shall pass. You can say that however you want, but I love that quote. I used to use that when I was in some of my darkest moments. I would remind myself that you've been through this before and it always passes, and this too shall pass. Or you can say the intensity of what you're feeling will pass. Remember that these clouds always pass. Emotions come from how we're looking at the situation and from the meaning we attach to it. Now, that sounds very dry and, whatever. So, use your own words and just point out the gist of it. You can ask them, just to get them to ask themselves, what can I do to lighten my stress load? You can point out that the body is part of our perception system, and is the body being adequately cared for? Are we eating healthy? Are we resting enough? And here's why advice and assuring statements are weak. The truth is that we don't get it. Even if we can empathize fully, we don't look at life through their same goggles. And very likely it's a long-running issue that they don't feel seen, heard, understood, or acknowledged. And giving our advice, what we think they need to hear, usually just confirms their sense of isolation and separation. So, I say it's best to exhibit acceptance, which is not the same thing as non-reaction, but acceptance of their current experience and showing a recognition that care and attention are needed, but also that there's no need to collapse, to freak out, to feel that there's no point to life. Be a source of balance. Do I tell people, do I tell other people or call 911? No. I was thinking how many people have actually called me when they're going through their suicidal depression, and it's only very few. Usually, almost all of the people that I've talked to about it, it's well after the moment and they've had time to reflect on things. But in the moment, there are different opinions on, do you call 911, do you involve other people, like their family or whatever. Use your best judgment. Where did the conversation end? What sense did you get? Did you see them go through any of the grieving stages? Did they get to verbally ventilate? Did you feel their energy go from erratic and chaotic and dark to, more peaceful and more receptive? Just use your best judgment and use your full awareness of their situation, of where their head's at, their background, and what have they communicated to you. Just use your best judgment. I will say that they don't get it at the hospital either. Many people experience inhumane treatment and forced medication and tranquilizers. It's a type of healing that moves toward the physical, material aspect of reality for the purpose of social functionality. And it totally omits a spiritual facet or an inner life aspect. It's a drastic Band-Aid. It does save people from committing suicide. Most likely that's true, that it saves a lot of people from dying. But ultimately, we need a better response as a modern society to the immediate needs of people experiencing suicidal depression. What we're doing en masse is ignorant and barbaric. And yet, yes, it could prevent a suicide attempt. I've never been hospitalized, but I've interviewed people over the years inquiring as to their treatment once they were admitted, as well as their experiences and circumstances leading up to feeling suicidal and seeking medical attention. Almost every time the person was experiencing a collapse in their narrative, a sinkhole in the illusion of who they think they are, such as the ending of a relationship, the loss of a job, or the awakening to an ongoing dissatisfaction. Life is letting them see where the pieces don't line up, the false promises are being revealed, the disappointment can be overwhelming. The sense of betrayal or abandonment, the confusion, the emptiness, and all this distorts the perception of the world. Everything looks and feels bleak. And why live? What's all this effort for? That's how it feels. So be okay with that. Don't be afraid of that. I don't have any, thing to offer on how to tell what's a false alarm or just someone asking for attention. But I think when it's just someone that wants attention and you respond with, love and listening and compassion rather than a big, dramatic overreaction, and they respond positively to that by opening up to you, I think that's a real reaching out to connect with someone for help. But someone who prefers that overreaction, I think that is a call for attention, and that needs to be looked at too. Anyone that isn't, communicating their needs directly is probably struggling and is sending out the signals anyway that they would like a hand. So thanks for watching this. If you're willing to watch something like this, then that means that you care, and that's amazing. And again, you are not responsible for other people's actions, but you're responsible for your own. Live in your truth, share your truth, accept that others have their own truths, and it's all real for all of us individually. So walk in love, and good luck to everyone. I'll try to make a video specifically for the people who are going through suicidal depression as soon as I have some notes on that up. So, all right, thanks guys.